My name is Lieschen Gargano, as Hande said, and I'm really excited to talk about skills for collaborative event facilitation. We only have 20 minutes today, so we're barely scratching the surface. So I'm sure we'll have a lot more to dive into in both our breakouts. As Hande mentioned, that's who I am, but you already know me. We do have coming soon, hopefully around March, a deeper dive, micro-credential. So look out for that too, if this topic interests you and you want to go deeper than the 20 minutes we have here today. So I'm going to kick us off with an activity. I'm assuming you all have facilitated meetings recently, that you have struggled as a facilitator at some point recently, right? We all do, even the best of us. So I just want you to take a minute and write down like some behaviors or struggles that you've had recently, right? That didn't get you the outcomes you wanted from your meetings. You didn't get the goal that you wanted, right, to achieve. And we're going to use that as we walk through some other activities throughout the talk today. So go ahead and just take a second, bring those things to the front of your mind, and we'll use them.
The lack of engagement, recency bias, aggressiveness, competitiveness, people not attending, cosmetic save. That's a good one. Not prepared.
All right. Awesome. And thank you for sharing some of them as well. We're going to keep those in our mind and we're going to use them as we move forward. So some of the common struggles that we have noticed, right, and that we probably just heard from Hande reading your comments, right, is we'll have competition in meetings, right? So people showing up in competition with one another, even if they're on the same team with the same goals. Maybe a lack of accountability, right? Sometimes it's really hard to get us to decisions and get us through conflict if we're struggling with accountability. This one's really hard, right? There's one conversation happening in the meeting and a whole other conversation happening in private Slacks. Maybe people are even saying a completely different thing out loud in the meeting than they are expressing in their Slack. This goes along with false consensus. We see that a lot where everybody agrees to something in the meeting. You think you've gotten there and then, oh, never mind. They just wanted to get out of the space and the consensus isn't real and you leave the meeting and it's gone, right? And another big one, we'll see defensiveness. So instead of listening to one another and being ready to work through conflict, they spend most of the time defending themselves, defending their decisions, defending where they're at, right? And again, you get really stuck. And as you said, other problems, people don't even show up or they don't know how to participate, right? Some of those other things that you mentioned in the chat here. So what do we hope to get out of being better at conflict management and using collaborative facilitation? Well, ultimately, we want that growth mindset. We talk about this in SAFE a lot, right? We want to feel safe enough to show up and be curious, right? And to think about learning so that we aren't in that defensive space or that competitive space. And along with that competitive space, we want to change that to an abundance mindset, right? So if you've got people who are really defensive, they feel like if they give a piece of the pie to someone else on their team, that there's less pie for them, right? But an abundance mindset and collaborative facilitation just make the pie bigger, right? We want people engaging directly in their conflicts. So again, instead of saying something else on the side, oh, I disagree with that, but I'm going to stay quiet, right? We want to use collaborative facilitation to help people actually engage in the moment and build those stronger relationships and get to better outcomes. Some of the other awesome things that come out of this, right? You get active listening, people showing up that are listening to understand, listening to learn, and repeating it back to see if they got it right? Instead of maybe preparing their response instead of listening. I'm sure that's happened to all of us. And then ultimately you get better alignment out of that, right? So that's the why for why we want to focus, especially in our RTE roles. And as facilitators, right, we need to be making sure that we're focused on improving our conflict management. All right. So we're going to start by talking about positions and interests. So I really like this because I can like see people in a meeting when I see this graph, right? So we've got the top of the iceberg, this position. And it's when people come into your meeting with a statement, right? We can't get that work done. It's not possible. Right. And that's the blue. And then the yellow's like, you have to, right? The business needs it. Those are very strong positions, right? And we don't really see a lot of crossover in that. That's a very big conflict statement. So as a facilitator, when you come into a space like that, the tool of thinking through positions and interests is really your first line of defense, right? For changing the tone of the conversation. And that's really to understand the interest. It's asking open-ended questions to find out why people are saying what they're saying. Okay. Oh, the work is too ambiguous to where I don't even know where to start. Well, that's a very different statement than I can't do it, I won't do it. Right? Oh, the customer really needs a specific aspect of the value of that work. Oh, well, that's a very different statement than you have to do all of it right now. Right? And suddenly we're starting to potentially see where we could have a crossover of mutual interest, what we both want. Right? The person doing the work wants to be successful and understand what they're delivering. And in this case, the other probably product owner, right, wants value delivered to the customer. And so now we can start having a very different conversation. And as a facilitator, by helping them back into those interests, you're helping them find that mutual interest. You're helping expand that pie, right? And work through a conflict in a way where you'll get to a better outcome. So let's practice with this. I've got 2 statements here. So we'll start with the top one. And first, I just want you to read that top line, and then in the chat, write what positions do you see in this statement? Just in the top sentence, what are the positions that you're seeing when you read that? So their position is that there's no research, right? Lack of focus. Position is that it won't be prioritized, right? That we shouldn't prioritize this, that we won't. Okay. So now how would we can't talk to these people. We can make assumptions about the background based on our experience. So knowing that, right? So if we were facilitating this, we would start asking open-ended questions. But for this example, take a look at this and then rewrite the statement as interest-based. Again, you're going to have to make assumptions because you can't actually ask questions out loud of the person who said this. But how might you reframe this into interests instead of positions? Oh, nice. So Joel reframed it as a question. What makes this work valuable to the customer so that we should prioritize it? Yeah, so that's a good reframe. Yeah, the reframe. I want to prioritize features based on the research done, based on the value that we've discovered through the research. That was a great reframe. Yeah. Right. I'm struggling to see how this feature is valuable to the customer, right? Without research. There you go. So yeah, some really helpful reframes. So as facilitators, right, or as RTEs helping people prioritize their backlogs, especially as we get ready, for PI planning or other, right, prioritization events, we can look for that language and we can ask some of those questions. Oh, tell us more about the research and the value we're hoping to get out of it based on that, right? And reframing an interest to get us a little bit further than I won't prioritize it and you have to. All right, let's try the second one. The team didn't plan well enough during PI planning. I don't want walk-up word from them. I'm just going to say no when they ask. What position are they taking? Yeah, the position. They're definitely pushing back. They're not supportive. If I'm the person saying this, though, my position is they didn't prepare and I don't want to deal with their lack of preparedness, right? That's how I read it personally, right? So it's a very, it's a judgment statement. I don't want surprises. I might read into this, again, we can't talk to the people who said this. I might read into this as they're overwhelmed or they're concerned, right? Or they don't see how the plans are coming together. Yeah, it's very us versus them, very, scarcity mindset, right? Okay, so let's reframe it again, knowing we can't talk to them and ask them, but what interests do we think this person or people saying they won't prioritize the work, what are their interests? Yeah, I'm seeing some good open-ended questions. How might we understand the work better now? Right? Predictable delivery to the customer is definitely an interest. Yeah, a lot of good questions in here, like how might you get the conversation going further? Understanding the time frame. Right. So yeah, so as facilitators, when we hear these statements again, lots of great ideas coming through the chat. It's a really great reminder for us, even if it feels like a basic, sometimes things get heated, we get overwhelmed, to remind ourselves to come back to what positions am I hearing and how might I find out what the interests are or reframe as an interest. And to your point, to a lot of these examples here, you all are using great open-ended questions to help get to those interests too. Let me, use active listening to reframe what you just said and see if I can reframe it into an interest that helps change the conversation. And that's a great step in collaborative facilitation for engaging in the conflict, right? So that we can actually get through it. All right. So let's talk about the triangle of satisfaction a little bit. So you've done your positions or interests, you're using your open-ended questions, you're reframing when the people in the group are struggling to use more open language, when they're feeling really position stuck. You feel like you had success, and then the conflict comes back. You thought you got to an answer, you thought you knew the priority of the backlog, but it keeps getting debated and you keep getting stuck in hours of meetings talking about the same thing you thought you solved already. This tool from Christopher Moore is to help you understand why those things keep coming back on you. So let's run with that example of a prioritized backlog. You are leaving this meeting, you've got a prioritized backlog, you feel great about it, you're ready for teams to start planning the work, and then they come back in and they're questioning the priority again. So the triangle of satisfaction offers the 3 sides that you really need to move forward for a conflict to have been solved. So psychologically, right, this one comes across very often as maybe the engineer saying, I wasn't involved in the decision. I wasn't adequately like my expertise wasn't really respected in the way that you got to this, right? This is where this might be a little bit of gray area, but I don't trust, like psychologically, I feel like this goes against the research I have or the beliefs I have, right? So psychologically, I just feel like I wasn't included or respected. That can sometimes look like procedural, right? But procedurally, I just didn't like the process. It didn't work. I got surprised. I didn't see the feature early enough. I didn't feel like there was enough time to prepare. The meetings were really accusatory and we didn't, right? So like procedurally, we didn't have a good process for getting to an answer. So they want to come back and try the process again. That's why they keep coming back to talk about it. And then substantive, right? Sometimes they just don't like the outcome. So when we look at the triangle of satisfaction, that's another great tool for us to step back if we just feel like we're having that same conversation over and over. And as a facilitator, we need to get them past it. So some of the tools we might use, right, when we think about these 3 things, are trying to understand how did people feel in this moment? Was there a moment in one of the meetings where they felt attacked, for instance, right? They felt backed into a corner. As a facilitator, I can have a one-on-one conversation, work with that person to understand what happened, and then maybe work with 2 individuals instead of a larger group to help get past some of that maybe psychological damage, relationship damage that happened that might be leading to the perpetual conflict, right? Procedurally, one of the tools we use all the time, right? We do retros. We even do retros on some of our processes so that we can improve them, right? So procedurally, how do I need to change the flow of process, right? This is huge for us as RTEs. How do I need to adjust this process so that you felt engaged, informed, right? That it made sense how we got from point A to point B. And it doesn't have to be, a formal retro. It could be a survey. It could be empathy interviews, but just, helping yourself plan ahead to know what kind of process is going to satisfy the people involved. And then substantive outcomes, if sometimes people just aren't going to be happy with the answer. They really want something else prioritized. But if you can help them expand the pie, like we were talking about before, if they've gotten to a place of talking in interests instead of positions, right, then the substantive outcome is more likely to make sense to them, even if it's not the outcome they wanted. So that's the tool for getting that substantive outcome, because we know we can't satisfy everyone. We can't pick the answer that everybody wants, right? Because especially if there's a couple hundred people, there's always going to be a few. But so those are some of the ways that we can help solve a conflict that otherwise keeps sneaking back up on us. Okay, so let's talk through some of these. I would love for you all to chat some examples, and maybe we can talk through some recurring conflicts you had, right? Procedural or psychological interests that have gotten in your way. Let's talk through them. Or substantive. Yeah, as I see William Wright said, you could throw these diagrams up on a whiteboard. I am with you on that one. Like sometimes just naming what you think is happening in the room can really help everyone get a shared language and talk through it. So yes, I love the idea of showing people these tools that you're using as a way of helping facilitate them through it. Okay, so I just saw one, why am I included in this meeting, right? Feedback from people that you feel should be decision makers, right? But they're not sure why they're there. So that's probably procedural, but it could be psychological. They feel overwhelmed and like they're being given too much responsibility. So asking some open-ended questions to find out if that's psychological or procedural. And then that might be a lot about meeting prep, right? So some of the tools you might use are the meeting purpose and preparation and talking through the outcome and exactly how those different individuals, how you see them fitting in. And then maybe they'll find you a stand-in instead of themselves, or maybe they'll start to see their value. So that's a great one. So maybe there's too much consensus. You can't move forward until everyone in the group is ready to move forward. That's a really tough one. So culturally, right, you've got this psychological need for total consensus. One of the tools that I've used for that is going into the meeting ahead of time, identifying kind of a tiebreaker or a decision maker. Like, okay, we have this much time. We know that there are a variety of decisions that are probably good-ish, right? None that are totally bad or totally good. And if we can't get to a decision in our time box, we're going to let our decider step in with the information they have from what we did. And I have found that in doing this, I've almost never had to use the decider because the pressure of knowing that you either come to consensus in that time or you don't works to get people all on board together. So you might try that. Okay, so I think I'm running out of time a bit. So I want to, I'll move on. But if you want to come to my breakout group, we can talk through more of these. This is my favorite. I put this slide for most of my presentations. Courage is mastery, not absence of fear. So what all are you going to do? You can put it in the chat. What action are you going to take after our talk today that's going to improve how you approach conflict in your meeting? What's one thing you could do? Yeah, active listening, welcoming and naming it so you can address it together in the room, reframing. Yeah, using the triangle. Yeah, even bringing it up. I love that idea of just like putting it up on the board. That was a great idea. Yeah, restating what you think someone's saying. Because if you're wrong, I promise they'll tell you. And they'll use different language, which can always help in the room. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I would read Moore's book cover to cover. It's more of a reference book. It is very much a textbook, but I highly recommend the book. But you'll probably want to pick chapter by chapter based on what you're looking to learn. Yes, open-ended questions, always valuable. Awesome. All right, so I think we have a little bit of time for questions that we can answer, and then I just put up my contact information if anybody wants to contact me after this.